it helps to shatter the illusion, I think, that Russia is a superpower, and at one stage may mean that they have to come to the table. I do think that in the interim, before we get to the end of Trump's 50 days, if we ever do, that the Russians will continue to hit Ukraine as much as they can. And I believe that there'll be that reciprocal attacking from the Ukrainians to try and alter that calculus.
It's not just the Russians that are flying drones at different targets. Ukraine conducted for them, it was significant 43 drone strike on Rostov and other regions deep inside Russia. And in Rostov, they've hit a major railway station and railway hub over the last 24 hours. Are these Ukrainian strikes more significant, better targeted, and having more of a military effect on Russia's ability to continue to prosecute its conflict, and a psychological blow for the Kremlin?
Well, I think it's interesting that you mentioned just now, Philip, of course, the moral component. What we're really talking about here is Ukraine's ability and wish to knock out as much as they can of the physical component. Firstly, to stop things getting to the front, i.e. a railway hub, and secondly, to degrade the economic potential when they hit things like drone factories and things like that. So from their perspective, it's an imperative to do this. I think the problem with both sides is that we've never really seen in a campaign in history where a strategic bombing campaign, or the equivalent, which is what they're doing with the drones, has led to a decision all by itself. What it seeks to do really is to raise the costs in a pressure strategy for both sides. So you alter the cost benefit analysis, and hopefully from the Russian perspective or the Ukrainian perspective, and you bring the other side to the negotiating table where you create the favorable conditions for the outcome that you seek to achieve, which of course is always that political outcome. So it's sensible that the Ukrainians do what they're doing. Will it be decisive? No, I don't think it will. But it helps to shatter the illusion, I think, that Russia is a superpower, and at one stage may mean that they have to come to the table. I do think that in the interim, before we get to the end of Trump's 50 days, if we ever do, that the Russians will continue to hit Ukraine as much as they can. And I believe that there'll be that reciprocal attacking from the Ukrainians to try and alter that calculus. But again, I think we both understand that in terms of the political outcomes which each side seeks to achieve, they don't look at this through an economic prism where the leaders of each country, particularly Putin, he's not an accountant, he is not an economist, he's someone who has always sought this imperial revanchist Russia, and that was quite clear on his last phone call with President Trump, that he will not back down, that he does seek the demilitarization of Ukraine, that he does seek the denazification, as he sees it, of Ukraine. He does see that they need to see the root causes, which of course would take him back to either 1991 or 1997, with the sort of false myth of NATO expansion being something which was that he didn't cause, which of course he did. All those countries freely joined NATO to try and get real security. And again, that Russia should realize the territorialities as he sees them. And that is the impasse that we really see ourselves in at the moment, when neither Russia or Ukraine currently has much of an incentive to stop fighting. Ukraine refuses to surrender, and Russia seeks nothing less than the capitulation of Ukraine. None of those things are going to happen at the moment. So we haven't got a gap analysis in terms of negotiations, and there's this notion that they may recommence tomorrow, but I don't put much beyond a bit of confidence building measures in terms of some more prisoner exchanges. So it's not gap analysis at the moment, it's chasm analysis, and there's no way that can be breached at the moment, in my view.
Yeah, well, adding the chasm analysis, General Budanov, the head of Ukraine's military intelligence, the HUR, was reported in Ukraine's newspapers this morning as saying that Russia has got plans to expand its military, create 2 new military districts, a number of new military formations, and spend $1 trillion between now and 2036 in professionalizing and growing its military capability. Can it? Has it got the wherewithal? Is this just Russian pie in the sky?
Well, of course, like all things in war, there are too many variables to answer that. And particularly, rather like an economist, you should never give a time and a figure at the same time, one or the other. Um, at the moment, NATO's view, of course, is that Russia will reach its zenith in terms of economic potential in 2027. After that period in time, there'll be a glide path down to stagflation and all the stuff that goes with that. But as I've said, there are so many variables because we don't ultimately know what the support from China might be. Wang Yi, in an unguarded moment a week or so ago, did say to Kaya Kalla, the EU EU foreign high representative, that China did not want to see Russia lose because the US may change all its attention and give all its attention to the Taiwan and the Chinese theatre. And at the same time, there's this notion that North Korea might provide another 30,000 troops alongside sustaining artillery. So there are just too many variables, including the variable that in the 50-day interregnum before Trump makes a decision, indeed, if he does that, of course, because that also gives 50 days for Putin to get at him. And there's no doubt that Putin would just try and like to do a deal of some sort with Trump, and that Zelensky and the broader West, Europe, really don't have any agency in this fight. It's a figure that of the 2035. Do I think that Russia has that economic and military potential in that time frame? Only if it were to potentially win win in Ukraine, and it becomes a vassal state of Russia, because of course then you potentially would have the transference of a lot of resources. I don't think that would be the case though, because rather like in Machiavelli's words, if once you've tasted freedom, the ruler of a city can never sleep with his eyes fully shut.
President Trump put a 50-day peace ultimatum out there that gives Putin another 50 days to influence him. But UK and Germany are now spearheading, after the Ukraine contact group meeting on Monday, spearheading a 50-day drive to arm Ukraine. What specific capabilities do you think that UK and Germany can get to Ukraine in that 50-day period of time? What does that match what Ukraine really needs? And do you think it's going to make a tangible difference?
Well, I think the shopping list has always been consistent from Zelensky, and what he's always required is a consistency of supply and a numerical consistency of supply and a regularity of supply. It's no secret that the at the high end, it's the ballistic missile threat which is doing most of the damage. So it's that consistency of the high end Patriots in particular, even if that's NATO buying it from the Americans. What would be really useful in terms of the deep battle is ensuring that if they had something like Tomahawk cruise missiles that would extend the range to something like 1,200 kilometers. We won't find out from the Germans if Chancellor Merz has given Taurus missiles. That is not going to be announced publicly. That would potentially be a game changer, not because of the range, but because the technology of the Taurus is slightly different. That would potentially give the Ukrainians at a time and place that it's choosing the potential, if they wanted it, to take down the Kerch Bridge, which might be something which would put Putin on the horns of a dilemma, because it would almost have Crimea as something that might wither on the vine, very difficult to resupply. That might put him under real pressure. So it's that mix of range and capability plus the air defense, which are the two great things that Ukraine really needs, and they need them in numbers, because as we've seen, the intensive aerial assaults, they're increasing in number. You don't need Patriot missiles to take down Shahed 136s, but you need a consistency of the layered air defense that comes underneath Patriot to ensure you can knock as many of those down as possible. I think one of the good things which is happening is that the notion of joint US Ukrainian air defense production for the future gives the US a stake in this. But the potential fear is, of course, that within the 50 days of Trump, he might change his mind again. It's that old Trump changes, Trump never follows through. And you don't know, because that gives, I don't know how many days we've got left now. I think it's about 38. Putin could still get to him. There's a lot of time. It's back to Harold Wilson's notion that a week in politics is a long time. 38 days with Trump in his mercurial mind is absolutely a long time.
Well, it's also, it's 2nd of September. I think the 50 days is up. And secondary sanctions you're coming in, that would be against primarily China, India, and other countries that are accepting Russian goods. The EU, I understand, after the contact group meeting yesterday, have put additional sanctions on those countries, or they are sanctioning some of the companies in those countries that are accepting Russian goods. And then, of course, the EU has dropped the value of Russian oil from $60 a barrel down to $47.60 a barrel, which will impact Russia economically. So there seems to be a lot happening. And if I was President Zelensky and was going to use any Taurus missiles or other missiles, I think sometime before the 2nd of September would send the right message to Vladimir Putin to come to the negotiating table.
I think all that you said is sort of true, but I think a lot of it also comes with a caveat. The caveat for me is that there have been so many let-outs. That's why we're on, for example, in the EU package, the 18th round of sanctions. It is also the case, for example, that although 7 Russian banks have previously by the US been disconnected from the SWIFT system, there were certainly significant numbers that have not been. And that might well be the case with the whatever the package Trump comes up with. And indeed, there's a big difference, of course, between the executive and the legislature in terms of the package which Lindsey Graham and Blumenthal have proposed is 500% secondary sanctions, as opposed to the 100% of President Trump, which may then be caveated again in certain terms in the way that he keeps changing his mind with the tariffs. And indeed, it was 100% tariffs was the term that Trump used a few days ago. So I'm not sure he actually knows what he means. And indeed, there's another interesting one, I think, in terms of it was only a few days before Trump made his announcement that Rubio was saying we don't really want to go down a large sanctions package because it might negate trying to get Russia to any form of ceasefire or negotiation. So again, you've still got a delta between those type of positions, which are almost articulated in a different way in a different week. And therefore, I think there's still a lot to play for. So I don't think there's any certainty. As we know, the only predictable thing about President Trump is his unpredictability.
Yes, well, that unpredictability. So finally, you're considering the events in the last sort of 72 hours with the bombardments, the aid package, the upcoming peace talks in Istanbul, the grinding war of attrition. What's your overall assessment as where the current trajectory is? Are we seeing a decisive shift? Is there a new brutal phase, or are we in more of the same for the next X period of time?
No, I still think that the thing is really progressing at a glacial pace. I don't see this ending in 2025. I don't see an unlocking of any center of gravity through attacking weakness on either side. So, trying to raise the cost to each side is a fundamental thing to do. Do I see that being raised to a point where it will lead to negotiations which are equitable on both sides? No, I don't, at least for the next 3 to 4 months.
So on that note, General Chip, that's given us the excuse to call you back again and have another chat. So thank you very much indeed for chatting to me today on Frontline.
Thank you, Philip.
You've been watching Frontline with me, Philip Ingram. If you'd like access to exclusive content, please subscribe to Times Radio membership and watch us on YouTube. But you can now get us as a podcast wherever you get your podcasts from. And don't forget, you can also listen to Times Radio for the latest updates on global affairs and read about them at thetimes.com. Thank you.